Good morning. Following on from my overly long video yesterday about the queen bee and the mistake that I was almost 99.9% sure that they had made with their information about the queen bee, not all of the information, but the bit about laying eggs, etc. Anyway, watch the video if you want to know more about that. I'm going to jump back into that program. I've now had, let me just say, I have now had complete validation by the indomitable Rob. I knew I wouldn't be able to say that word. And the fabulous Kath from the Bee Centre in Chorley, who are two of the most knowledgeable beekeepers I know, saying I was absolutely right and they were absolutely wrong. Anyway, let's move on to another gripe I had with it. Now, I know when these cameramen go out and they video wildlife, they cannot interfere. They absolutely cannot interfere. You know, there was the famous one with the penguins trying to go up the snow, you know, and they interfered and everyone went, oh, you shouldn't. But this chap was videoing bees from a hive. They weren't wild bees, they were bees who had swarmed from a hive. And during the programme, they swarmed, which was, you know, very Andy-ary, and they ended up in a tree, and the weather took a turn for the worse, and he videoed them in the rain and their reaction to the rain, and they were getting cold and wet, and then he went home, and to his delight, they were still there in the morning and able to fly off into a hole in the tree. Here I go again. These were not wild bees. They were bees that had been kept by a beekeeper. They were bees that had been treated but for various diseases and whatever bees suffer from. Therefore, to stand and watch them getting soaking wet, abandoning them and going back and finding them there. No, one thing I always say, if you see a swarm, when I give my talks, if you see a swarm, please contact your local beekeeping club. Then somebody like me on their swarm collection list will come and rescue that swarm and take it back to their apiary and look after it. Okay, now there's a ways of looking after it. I'm not going into that. But it was such a bad message to anybody that's not a beekeeper. You would not leave a swarm in a tree, see it get bedraggled and wet, and come back the next morning to see if it survived. You just wouldn't. The chances are that once those bees, which were kept in a box, had swarmed, and when I go kept in a box, I mean had become unknown to them, domesticated and looked after by beekeepers. Once they had gone into that hole in the tree, would they survive? There's a big chance some of them have varroa. All our bees do. And what will happen then? They will remain untreated, and then they will mix with beekeepers' bees, and they will pass that on. That's if they survive long enough in a wild. So that, again, I felt was a terrible message giving out to people who don't know anything about beekeeping, that if you see a swarm, leave it there, it will be fine. If it survives the night, they will find a hole in a tree. Yes, they will, but will they survive living in the hole in the tree? What? No, you don't see a swarm and leave it there. You report it and we will come and collect it and ensure its safety. Those bees are so vulnerable when they're hanging in a tree or from a swing. They're vulnerable, as you saw from the film, or if you watch it, from the weather conditions, from hooligans who might want to knock them off because they think it's funny. No, they're very, very vulnerable, and they do need help. So that was my second gripe, but I didn't want to leap in there until I'd had absolute validation that I wasn't wrong about my first one. And by the way, Rob said that he thought I delivered it like Ronnie Corbett. Now, I have been likened to a lot of people, but never Ronnie Corbett. But I'll take it. I'll take it.